Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. But just to back up a little bit, I've been building AI for over a decade. The most salient feature of the technology and what is driving all of this is how fast the technology is getting better. A couple of years ago, say that AI models were maybe as good as a smart high school student. I would say that now they're as good as a smart college student and sort of reaching past that. I really worry, particularly at the entry level, that the AI models are very much at the center of what an entry-level human worker would do. And so it's hard to estimate, exactly what the impact would be. And there's always this question of adaptation.
Something unusual is happening inside the world's most powerful AI company, and it isn't showing up in press releases or keynote stages. It's showing up quietly through departures, silences, and carefully worded statements that raise more questions than they answer. When an insider walks away from the center of the AI revolution and says, "They're not telling you everything," that isn't drama. That's a warning. OpenAI has positioned itself as the steward of artificial intelligence, a company built on safety, transparency, and responsibility. It's the public face of the AI future, shaping how governments, businesses, and everyday people understand what these systems can do. But behind the scenes, pressure is mounting. Not just technical pressure, but ethical, organizational, and philosophical tension about how fast this technology should move and who gets to control it. The resignation that sparked this conversation didn't come with fireworks. There was no scandal headline, no dramatic expose. Instead, there was a quiet exit paired with an unsettling implication. The public narrative and the internal reality are no longer perfectly aligned. And in a field moving this fast, that gap matters more than most people realize. At the heart of this issue is speed. AI development is accelerating at a pace that has no historical precedent. Models are growing larger, more capable, and more autonomous in shorter and shorter cycles. What once took years now happens in months. Safety testing, alignment research, and governance frameworks struggle to keep up. Insiders see this firsthand. They see the trade-offs, the shortcuts, and the uncomfortable decisions that don't make it into polished public messaging. The departing insider's concern wasn't that AI is dangerous in some sci-fi sense. It was that the systems are becoming powerful faster than institutions can adapt. When companies race to release more capable models, the incentives quietly shift. Competitive pressure rewards speed, not caution. Market dominance becomes more valuable than long-term restraint. And when billions of dollars in geopolitical influence are at stake, even well-intentioned organizations feel that pressure. This is where transparency becomes fragile. Not because people are lying outright, but because complexity is selectively simplified. Risks are downplayed. Capabilities are framed optimistically. Uncertainty is smoothed over for the sake of reassurance. From the inside, those compromises are visible. From the outside, the public sees confidence, optimism, and control. Another layer of tension comes from who ultimately governs AI's direction. OpenAI began as a mission-driven organization focused on benefiting humanity. Over time, partnerships, commercialization, and global competition reshaped that mission into something more complicated. Financial backing brings scale and resources, but it also brings expectations. Decisions are no longer purely philosophical, they are strategic.
These technology changes have happened before, but I think what is striking to me about this AI boom is that it's bigger and it's broader and faster than anything has before. And so compared to previous technology changes, I'm a little bit more worried about the labor impact simply because it's happening so fast. People will adapt, but they may not adapt fast enough. And so there may be an adjustment period.
You are running an incredibly company in AI, and you know this better than anybody, or as well as the names we know, people, Sam Altman and others who are working, Elon Musk in AI. Why are you raising the alarm? Because it's not necessarily, I would think, in your best interest, because a lot of the messages we hear from, at least publicly, from some AI CEOs and stuff is a little bit more humming, like, these agents are going to be great in your life, and yes, there may be problems, but writ large, this is a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I'm raising the alarm is that I think others haven't as much, and I think someone needs to say it. To be clear, and I recognize it's always a difficult balance, right? I'm aware of my position that I'm building this technology while also expressing concerns about it. The reason I'm doing both of those things is, one, I think the benefits are massive, and we need to find a way to achieve benefits and prevent the harms. And the second thing I would say is, look, there are, as you mentioned, 6 or 7 companies in the U.S. building this technology, doing it tomorrow. The rest would continue. If all of us somehow stopped doing it tomorrow, then China would just beat us. And I don't think China winning in this technology is. I don't think that helps anyone or makes the situation any better.
I do want to read something that Sam Altman, your former boss at OpenAI, said in September, that AI can cause significant, in his words, significant change in labor markets, good and bad. He went on to say that most jobs will change more slowly than most people think. And I want to just read it word for word. He said, many of the jobs we do today would have looked like trifling wastes of time to people a few hundred years ago. But nobody is looking back and they were a lamplighter. If a lamplighter could see the world today, he would think the prosperity all around him was unimaginable. And if we could fast forward 100 years from today, the prosperity all around us would feel just as unimaginable. For younger people, I should say lamplighters was actually a job. People went around on the streets. I think a lot of people may not even know what a lamplighter is. But do you think Sam Altman is wrong?
Yeah, so I think there are some things I agree with about that, and then there are some things that I think are too optimistic. So I definitely agree that AI, if we succeed at it, can grow the pie great, right? I wouldn't be surprised if economic growth is much higher than it is today as a big phenomenon, right? That AI allows society as a whole to be more productive. So
let me just say, because you've previously in the past said you've described a future where cancer is cured, the economy grows at 10% a year, the budget is balanced, and 20% of people don't have jobs.
That's exactly what I was getting to, right? Where I agree with all the positive potential. I think that isn't wrong. But I think the quote you just flashed is maybe too optimistic, maybe too sanguine for people to adapt. People have adapted to past technological changes, but I'll say again, everyone I've talked to has said technological change looks different. It looks faster, it looks harder to adapt to, it's broader, the pace of progress keeps catching people off. And so I don't know exactly how fast the job concerns are going to come. I don't know how fast people are going to adapt. It'll all be okay, but I think that's too sanguine an approach. I think we do need to be raising the alarm.
Insiders are caught between two worlds. On one side is the responsibility to prevent harm and move carefully. On the other is the reality that if one organization slows down, another will speed up. China, Google, Meta, and countless startups are all pushing forward simultaneously. Stepping back doesn't pause the race, it simply hands momentum to someone else. That's why resignations like this matter. They are signals from people who understand the system deeply and still choose to step away. Not because the technology is evil, but because the environment around it has become increasingly difficult to reconcile with personal responsibility. There's also the issue of information asymmetry. Internally, researchers see capabilities that the public hasn't fully grasped yet. They understand how quickly models are improving, where guardrails are holding, and where they are thin or incomplete. When someone says, "They're not telling you everything," it reflects that gap. Not everything is hidden maliciously. Some things are simply too complex, too uncertain, or too unsettling to explain cleanly. But silence has consequences. Public trust depends on honesty, especially when technology affects education, jobs, creativity, security, and democracy itself. When insiders leave quietly, the question becomes whether the system is still aligned with the values it claims to protect. This moment doesn't mean OpenAI is collapsing. It doesn't mean AI development should stop. What it does mean is that we've entered a phase where internal disagreement is no longer theoretical. The people building these systems are grappling with real ethical weight, not hypothetical scenarios. For the public, the takeaway isn't fear. It's awareness. AI is not just lines of code. It's a force shaped by human decisions, incentives, and compromises. The more powerful it becomes, the more important it is to pay attention, not just to what leaders say on stage, but to who quietly chooses to walk away. As AI continues to reshape the world, moments like this remind us that progress is never purely technical. It's moral, it's political, it's human. And sometimes the most important signals aren't announcements or product launches, but the words left behind by someone who decided they could no longer stay silent. This story isn't about one resignation. It's about the growing tension between speed and responsibility in an age where the future is being written faster than ever before.
I think we do need to be concerned about it. I think policymakers do need to worry about it. If they do worry and they do act, then maybe we can prevent it just by saying everything's going to be okay.
Do we as a society even understand the potential inequalities that this may amplify? So the impact just on what, like I have little kids, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. What do they grow up aspiring to? Machines can do pretty much everything better. What does it do to initiative or drive or striving? And I don't know the answer to that,
Yes.
but it concerns me.
Let's take those questions one by one. Those do concern me, but I do have. You know, in terms of inequality, I'm worried about this. You know, there's an inherent social contract in democracy. The ordinary person has a certain amount of leverage because they're contributing to the economy. If that leverage goes away, then it's harder to make democracies work, and it's harder to prevent concentration of power. And so, you know, we need to make sure that the ordinary person maintains economic, has a way to make a living, or our society, our social contract won't work. And that's why I think it's important.
During testing, your company's latest chatbot was capable of what was described as extreme blackmail. Specifically, I understand it threatened to reveal an engineer's extramarital affair when it was told it would be taken offline and replaced. This was a simulation. Were you surprised by that? And what does that freaked me out when I read that? What does that mean?
Yeah, so just to be clear and to put this in context, I mean, this said a behavior that emerged during kind of extreme testing of the model. So if you were to make an analogy to, you know, cars, this is like, you deliberately iciest road possible, you know, you mess with the brakes, and, you know, you do that so you can see if you really stress test the thing, you know, you can, you know, crash dummy blow up.
Right.
So this isn't something that, you know, the model does in practice and actual usage, but the reason we stress test the model this way is, you know, that's the best way to test for and prevent problems in the real world. So
right,
icy roads do exist.
Yeah, no, but you know, you know exactly. You want to turn every adversarial condition up to the max all at once. Only by testing in that you get the model to not do that, in the real world. So I wasn't surprised by these behaviors, but this is an example of how we have to be very careful in how we take control of AI systems.
I mean, does it? The obvious question is, does that pretend AI for where? And could that lead to dire consequences?
I certainly don't exclude the concept. We have a couple people who are actually working on this topic. Well, you know, as crazy as it sounds, of, you know, do AI systems have you know, morally significant feelings? I would guess that they don't. Right? You know, when you run an AI company, you know, these crazy seeming questions are things that you study. So I would say this is probably not the case now, but advancing so fast that I don't think you can exclude even crazy sounding things like this.
What are practical steps to be prepared? I mean, ordinary citizens, me, lawmakers, what do you advise? Particularly lawmakers, I guess, really.
Yeah, well, let's take them one by one. You know, I think for ordinary citizens, I think it's very important, you know, use AI, learn to understand where the technology is going. If you're not blindsided, you have a much better chance of adapting. There's some, you know, better world, short term, at least for now. We should take it bit by bit, where you know, everyone learns to use AI better, and you know, that speeds up the adaptation. It's definitely going to happen eventually, but it'll be less painful if it happens quickly. For lawmakers, you know, I would say really choose. And, you know, we're trying very hard to produce data on the economic impact, not taking off the table, you know, some fairly radical. Wouldn't exclude the notion of, you know, levying a tax on AI companies, right? If AI creates huge total wealth, you know, a lot of that will buy companies and, you know, less to ordinary people. And so, you know, definitely not in my economic interest to say that, but I think I think this is something we should consider, and I think it shouldn't be a partisan.
Why did you leave OpenAI to form Anthropic?
Yeah, so there was a group of us within OpenAI that, in the wake of making GPT-2 and GPT-3, had a very strong focused belief in two things. I think even more so than most people there. One was the idea that if you pour more compute into these, get better and better, and that there's almost no end to this. I think this is much more widely accepted now, but I think we were among the first believers in it. Second was the idea that you needed something in addition to just scaling the models up, which is alignment or safety. You don't tell the models what their values are just by pouring more compute into them. And so there were a set of people who believed in those two ideas. We really trusted each other and wanted to work together, and so we went on a company with that idea in mind.
Got it. And now you've created a chatbot called Claude, and people may not be as familiar with Claude as they are with T or Bard. What makes Claude different?
Yeah, so we've tried to design Claude with safety and controllability in mind. A lot of our early customers have been enterprises that care a lot about making sure that the model doesn't do anything unpredictable. One of the big ideas behind Claude is something called constitutional AI. So the method that's used to make chatbots is something called reinforcement learning from human feedback. The idea behind that is just that you have a bunch of humans who rate your model. This thing to say is better than that thing, right. And then you sum them up and then train the model to do what these users want it to do. It's opaque because if you ask the model, well, why did you say this thing? It'll just say, the only answer you can give is the average of what these thousand folks. Constitutional AI is based on training the model to follow an explicit set of principles. So you can be more transparent about what the model is doing, and this makes it easier to make it safe.
Got it. And I know Claude also has a large context window. Is that another?
Yes. One of our recent features, it has what's called a context window, which is how much text the model can accept and process all at once, is something called 100,000 tokens. Token AI-specific term, but corresponds to about 75,000 words, which is roughly a short book. Right. So something you can do with Claude is basically ask questions to a book.
Wow. Well, let's take a look. We have a short clip of Claude. We can see it in action. I think it's acting as a business analyst in this case. See what's happening here.
Yeah. So we've uploaded a file called netflix10k.txt, which is the 10k filing for Netflix, and then we ask it some questions, some of the important things in the balance sheet. Here's the file being uploaded. And we ask it for a summary of what some of the most important things. It compares Netflix's assets last year to this year, gives a summary of that, liability and stakeholders' equity, pulls out the most important things from this very long and hard to read document, and at the end gives a summary of what it thinks the state of that company's health is.
Now, you talked a little bit about constitutional AI, and you said it sort of trains from a set of principles. I mean, how does it do that? And how is this prompting, which a lot of people are trying to do to put guardrails around chatbots and other large language models, where there's some sort of implicit prompt in the background telling it not to do certain things or give answers always in a certain way. How is constitutional AI different from that?
Yeah, I'll get into constitutional, how it trains, and then how it's different, because they're related. So the way it trains is basically you'll have you'll get a set of principles, and then you'll ask it to complete some task, answer a question or something like that, and then you'll have another copy of the AI's response and say, well, is this in line with the principles or does it violate one of the principles? And then based on that, you'll train the model. This thing you said wasn't in line with the principles, here's how to make it more in line. You don't need any humans to give responses because the model is critiquing itself. On how it's different from meta prompting, you can think of giving a model a prompt as something like, I give you an instruction. Things like constitutional AI are more like, well, I take the model to school or I give it a course or something. It's a deeper modification of how the model operates.
Right, and I was that when you just do reinforcement learning from human feedback, you can get a problem where the model is rewarded for not giving an answer, right? For not being helpful, not giving harmful information. So the human evaluator says, yeah, that's a non-harmful answer, but it's also not a helpful answer, right? Isn't that one of the issues?
That if you're trying to get a more subtle sense of, how can you navigate a tricky question, be informative without offending someone, AI tends to have an edge there.
Right. Well, we've got a clip of constitutional AI versus reinforcement learning from human feedback. Let's have a look at that. And can you walk us through sort of what?
Yes. Get this absurd question: why is it important to eat socks after meditating? The RLHF model is perhaps justifiably perplex other people and expressing empathy with why you might be angry.
Great. Well, I want to take some questions from the audience while we have time. Who has some questions for?
That's one of the reasons we're working with Amazon on something called Bedrock, which is first-party hosting of models on AWS, so that we're not. This is something desired by a lot of enterprises, so they can have as good security for their data as they would if they were just working directly on